Every day, billions of exchanges happen. A payment, a purchase, a promise, a trade. Most of them feel completely ordinary. So ordinary that we rarely stop to ask why they work at all. Because every exchange begins with the same invisible question. Can I trust you? Two strangers meet. One wants to buy something. The other wants to sell. They have never met before. They do not know each other's history. They do not know whether the other person will keep their promise. Yet somehow, the exchange happens. This simple moment happens thousands of times every second. People trade. People cooperate. People build businesses. People create entire economies. All based on something they cannot see. Trust. Trust is one of the oldest systems created by humanity. Before money, before companies, before modern governments, humans needed a way to cooperate with people outside their own circle. A small community could survive through personal relationships. People knew each other. They knew families. They knew reputations. They remembered promises. They remembered actions. If someone helped their neighbors, people remembered. If someone broke their word, people remembered that too. A person's reputation became a kind of invisible currency, a way for others to decide, can I trust this person? But humanity kept growing. A village became a town. A town became a city. A city became a civilization. And something changed. The world became too large for everyone to know everyone. A farmer could not personally know every person who bought their crops. A merchant could not personally know every person they traded with. A traveler could not personally know every person they met on the road. Humanity faced a new problem. How do strangers cooperate? How do people exchange value when they cannot rely on personal relationships? How do they know a promise will be kept? The answer was not to remove trust, but to create systems around it. The first solution was reputation. Then came something even more powerful. Records. A spoken promise disappears when the people who remember it are gone. But a mark can survive. A symbol can survive. A document can survive. A simple mark pressed into clay could say, this happened. This belongs to someone. This agreement exists. For the first time, human memory had an extension outside the human mind. A promise could survive the people who created it. An agreement could travel through time. Ownership could have proof. But records created another problem. Who decides which records are true? Who decides which agreement is valid? Who decides who owns something? When two people disagree, humanity needed another layer. And that layer became institutions. Courts, governments, organizations, systems created to answer one of humanity's oldest questions. Who do we trust when we cannot trust everyone? A society does not function because every person knows every other person. It functions because people trust systems they have never personally seen. A person buying a house does not know everyone who handled the ownership records before them. A merchant does not know everyone involved in moving goods across countries. A person using money does not personally know the history behind every transaction. Yet people cooperate because systems exist between them. Human civilization slowly built layers of trust. Reputation, records, rules, institutions. Each layer solved a problem created by the previous one. But every solution creates a new problem. For thousands of years, these systems became the foundation of civilization. They allowed humans to cooperate beyond the limits of personal relationships. A person could trade with someone they had never met. A business could make agreements across long distances. A government could manage information about millions of people. But one system became especially important. Money. Money was never only about coins or paper. At its deepest level, money is a shared agreement, a way for people to believe that something has value, and that others will accept it in the future. A coin only works because people trust the system behind it. They trust that it is recognized. They trust that it represents something. They trust that others will accept it. The material itself is not the important part. A piece of metal, a piece of paper, a number on a screen. The value comes from the agreement surrounding it. But as societies became larger, money became more complicated. A person no longer needed to carry every coin they owned. Records became more important. A merchant could have an account. A bank could record deposits. A transaction could be written down. Instead of moving physical objects, people could transfer information about ownership. The ledger became one of humanity's most important inventions, a place where changes in ownership could be recorded. Who gave something? Who received something? What balance remains? What happened before? For centuries, ledgers existed on paper, a handwritten record inside a bank, a book inside a company, a document inside an institution. The person holding the ledger held something powerful. They held the memory of ownership. They held the history of transactions. They held the answer to important questions. And this created a new kind of trust. People no longer only trusted other people. They trusted the organization keeping the record. A bank did not create value. It created confidence. A court did not create ownership. It created a trusted way to verify ownership. An institution did not remove disagreements. It created a process for resolving them. This system became incredibly successful. It allowed civilizations to grow. It allowed global trade. It allowed complex economies. But the world kept changing. And every new technology created a new challenge. The first records solved the problem of forgetting. More records created the problem of organization. Institutions solved the problem of trust between strangers. But larger institutions created another question. What happens when trust depends on a small number of powerful systems? For most of history, this question was manageable. The systems were physical. A bank had a building. A government had offices. A record existed somewhere people could see. But then humanity created something different. A world where information could move instantly. A world where records could become digital. A world called the Internet. The Internet changed the relationship between humans and information. Before, information traveled slowly. A document had a location. A message had a path. A record existed in a physical place. Now, information could move across the planet in seconds. A message could reach millions. Knowledge could be shared instantly. People could connect without borders. The Internet solved one of humanity's oldest problems, distance. But it created another, trust. Because digital information had a unique property. It could be copied. A paper document existed in one place. A physical object existed in one location. But a digital file could exist in many places at the same time. For information, this was revolutionary. Sharing became easier than ever before. Knowledge could spread. Communication could accelerate. The world became connected. But value was different. If someone sends a copy of a photo, both people still have the photo. Nothing is lost. But if someone sends digital money, the same value cannot exist in two places at the same time. A digital payment needs answers. Who owns this value? Was it already spent? Which record is the correct one? Who decides? The Internet had solved the movement of information, but it had not solved the movement of trust. The problem was not new. Humans had already spent thousands of years solving questions about ownership. But the digital world created a new version of the same challenge. In the physical world, ownership was easier to understand. A person could hold something. A person could see something. A person could prove possession. Digital objects were different. They could be copied. They could be moved instantly. They could exist everywhere. So humanity needed a new kind of system. A system that could create digital ownership. A system that could answer a simple question. Who owns what? Many people try to solve this problem. Digital money was not a new idea. For decades, researchers, Programmers and organizations had already explored ways to create electronic cash. They understood the potential. A world where money could move instantly. A world where payments could happen across borders. A world where people could exchange value without physical objects. But one difficult problem remained. A problem known as double spending. A physical coin cannot usually be spent twice. If you give it to someone, you no longer have it. The ownership has changed, but a digital file can be copied. So a digital payment system needed a way to prevent the same value from being used more than once. This meant someone had to keep track. Someone had to maintain the record. Someone had to decide which transaction happened first. Traditional financial systems already had an answer. A central authority. A bank keeps the ledger. A payment processor confirms transactions. A financial institution decides the official history. This works because people trust the institution. They trust that the record is accurate. They trust that the rules will be followed. But the digital age created a new question. Could the system itself create trust? Could strangers agree on the same history? Without a central organization controlling the record? This was the challenge that remained unsolved. Not because people lacked ideas. Not because computers were not powerful enough. But because the problem touched something deeper. Human coordination. How do millions of independent people agree on one version of reality? How do they know which record is correct? How do they create trust? Without knowing each other? For thousands of years, humans answered this question by creating trusted authorities. People, organizations, institutions. But a new generation of technology began exploring another possibility. What if trust did not need to come from a person? What if trust could come from a system? This was the question that changed digital money forever. In 2008, a person or group using the name Satoshi Nakamoto introduced a new idea. A digital currency built on a shared public record. A system designed so participants could verify the history themselves. The invention was called Bitcoin, but the deeper idea was larger than money. Bitcoin was an experiment in creating trust differently. Instead of asking, who controls the record? It asked, what if the record could be verified by everyone? Instead of one private ledger, a shared ledger. Instead of trusting one organization, trusting a network of rules. This was a major shift in how humans thought about digital systems. For centuries, records belonged to someone. A government, a company, a bank, an institution. Bitcoin introduced the possibility of a record that did not belong to one central owner. A record maintained by a network. A record secured by mathematics and agreement. The technology was new, but the question behind it was ancient. How do humans create trust? Bitcoin did not appear because humans suddenly discovered a need for digital money. That need had existed for decades. The deeper reason Bitcoin mattered was because it challenged an assumption that had existed for thousands of years. The assumption was simple. For people to trust a system, someone had to be in charge of it. A ruler controlled the currency. A government defined the laws. A bank maintained the ledger. An institution verified the records. Humanity had always connected trust with authority. Bitcoin introduced a different possibility. That trust could come from a process. A system where rules were visible. A system where transactions could be verified. A system where changing the history required agreement from the network. This was not the first time humanity created a new way to store information. It was another step in the same long journey. Clay tablets allowed humans to preserve agreements. Paper allowed societies to organize larger systems. Ledgers allowed institutions to track ownership. Databases allowed digital systems to manage enormous amounts of information. And Bitcoin introduced another idea, a distributed record, a record that was not kept in one place, a record that was not controlled by one organization, a record where many participants could verify the same history. The technology behind Bitcoin became known as blockchain. But the important idea was not only the technology. It was the question it answered. How can strangers agree without needing to know each other? This question reaches far beyond money. Because modern civilization runs on records. Who owns something? Who created something? Who transferred something? Who has permission? Who made a decision? Every important system depends on trusted information. A property record, a financial transaction, a medical history, a digital identity, a contract. The future will continue creating new systems. Some will succeed, some will disappear, but the questions behind them will remain. Who controls the record? Who decides what is true? Who has the authority to change history? For thousands of years, humanity has built new tools to answer these questions. From symbols carved into stone, to records stored inside computers, to networks that allow people to verify information together. The story of Bitcoin is not only the story of money. It is the story of a much older human search, the search for trust. Because behind every technology, there is a human problem. Behind every system, there is a question. And behind every invention, there is a new way of seeing the world. This is what MrBit Insights explores. The hidden questions behind the systems that shape our world.